What's up, pit crew? Welcome to the nation. I'm your host, Tim, and this is our debut episode. Today, we're talking about the Skyline. And I know what you're thinking. Seen it, heard it, skip. But hear me out. See, we're not talking about the GTR trim or the GTR as a standalone nameplate. We're talking about the Skyline model in its current form. That's right. The Skyline is in production, and you can get a brand new one here in the States. But before we get into that, we gotta get into the history.
In 1957, Prince Motor Company introduced the Skyline as a modest, four-door luxury car. It was rear-wheel drive and powered by a 60-horsepower, 1.5-liter four-cylinder with a 4-speed manual transmission. In 1959, it became available as a wagon. And in 1962, a coupe and a convertible was made, but they were handmade and were quickly abandoned for being too expensive for the segment. Come November of 1963, the Skyline had Japan's first full monocoque chassis, and a 1.9-liter diesel engine became available.
With its reduced weight, lower maintenance costs, a 2-year warranty when everyone else was only doing 1, and best-in-class performance, it became the benchmark for Japanese auto manufacturers. And that inspired Prince to hit the track. In 1964, they put an inline 6 into it and entered the Japan Grand Prix, where it took 2nd through 6th place, losing only to a Porsche 904. Now, even though that 6-cylinder Skyline was only supposed to be a homologation special, it was massively popular and became a flagship. So when Nissan and Prince merged in 1966, it just made sense to keep the Skyline going. But it would be another 3 years before it would wear a Nissan badge.
The 1969 Skyline is probably the first one you've heard of, though, as that was the year that it got its fabled GTR trim. And 1970 is when a coupe became widely available. From here, you likely know the story, or at least the gist of it, until the retirement of the R34 body style in 2002.
So what happened after 02? Well, Nissan was bringing back the Z car. But after 45 years, they didn't want to just close the book on the Skyline, so they joined the two of them at the hip. Now, due to Nissan's financial woes, however, the Japanese market was too small for both cars. Nissan had to expand the Skyline's market. The natural solution, since the Skyline was to return to being a luxury car anyway, and leave the sports car stuff to the Z, was to brand it as an Infiniti and sell it worldwide as the G35. Even though it kept the Skyline name in Japan, it was once again wearing a different badge. Nonetheless, the Skyline was saved from the Bean Counters Act, and the plan worked. At first, anyway. And the Infiniti badge Skyline increased Infiniti's global market share. So as the 350Z evolved into the 370Z, so the G35 Skyline evolved into the G37. The hard times were once again just around the corner. In 2013 alone, Infiniti had a year-over-year sales loss of almost 10%. They had to rebrand and separate more from Nissan. So in 2014, the Skyline Coupe was renamed from the G37 to the Q60 and discontinued in Japan. The sedan was renamed to the Q50 and got a whole new body style, furthering the goal of returning the Skyline to a luxury sedan. At that time, we got some new engine options as well. Mercedes sourced 2-liter, and a VQ35 hybrid was available worldwide, while the Europeans also got a 2.2-liter diesel, and America retained the VQ37 from the previous body style. It was a good change, but Nissan knew the 370Z needed a refresh too and something to drum up excitement for. So they developed an all-new engine, the twin-turbo VR30 DDTT, a proper successor to the VG30 DETT in the 300ZX. Brand new engine designs always have flaws at launch, and a flawed launch on a highly anticipated flagship car like the Z, it can sink a struggling auto manufacturer. Let's be honest, Nissan's been struggling for a while. So in 2016, the new engine went into non-JDM Skylines to work out any real-world bugs. Finally, the Skyline had a unique look and engine again. Real-world bugs? Well, they were very real, but ultimately they were minimal. So in 2018, the Japanese market got the engine as well. The trims were now the 200 GT for the 4-cylinder, 350 GT for the hybrid, GT for the 300 horsepower VR30, and the 400R for the 400 horsepower VR30.
Reviving the 400R badge from the 1997 special edition must have inspired Nissan, because in 2019, the JDM Skyline got Nissan badges again. While they were at it, it also got a different front bumper that's more in line with Nissan's current design language. And they introduced a quad-circle taillight design that's reminiscent of early 90s taillights.
So without further ado, let me introduce Pit Crew Nation Shop Car, my 2018 Skyline GT.
If you're detail-oriented, and if you're into cars, you probably are, you'll notice I've already modded this car some. You may notice I have the 2019 JDM taillights, and that I've debadged the trunk and added a carbon finisher that says Skyline. You might have even noticed that I debadged the fenders and put on the GT shields from the 90s Skyline. In fact, you probably noticed the shields are blue and white, but if you pull up a pic of a 90s GTR, the shield is red and white.
So does that mean I've been defrauded by a knockoff parts purveyor? No, because what's harder to find is that the shield had many colors over the years, and the colors used to actually mean something.
In 1972, when the C110 Skyline, lovingly known as the Ken Mary, came out, it wore red or black shields. There was an all-gold badge for the R32 at least as well. While I would speculate it was for a special edition, like an anniversary edition, I don't know for sure. Aside from the gold badge, turbo-equipped Skylines got a red badge, and non-turbo ones had a blue badge. But that color code went out the window when the R34 came out. Finally, there was a green version of the shield. I've seen a reference to the Datsun C210 with this badge, but again, it can be difficult to find reliable info on a foreign market car from 50 years ago. But getting back to the mods list, I've turned the top screen from navigation only into a GTR-like multifunction display. For the exhaust, I installed Megan Racing lower downpipes and had a local muffler shop make a custom 2.5-inch true dual catback exhaust with Flowmaster FlowFX mufflers and black chrome tips. As for the mods you may not notice, firstly, I did a JB4 from BurgerTuning.com. So what is a JB4? It's a piggyback tuner. It allows me to up the boost, it has better control over the electronic wastegates, and has map switching with logging and graphing capabilities. It can also control a water methanol injection system. With that, I also did a Smart Auto kit, which is what allows me to display gauges from the JB4 by converting the top screen into an Android tablet. I've also installed an oil catch can. Since this engine is direct injected, not port injected, there's no fuel to wash blow-by off the intake valves. The catch can traps most of the vaporized oil from the crankcase before it can re-enter the intake plenum. Obviously, it doesn't add performance, but if you want to keep your engine healthy, it's a must-have. For the sound system, I installed a JL 12-inch sub and Rockford amp using a Kicker line-out converter and amp wiring kit. Then finally, I installed a HiKit X9 throttle controller. Now if you don't know, auto manufacturers program electronic throttle bodies to open relatively slowly. They do that primarily for fuel economy, but also to make high horsepower vehicles easy to drive. If you're at a stop and you floor it, you'll notice a slight lag before your car moves, and even when it moves, you're not lighting up the tires like a muscle car. That's why just about anyone can drive something with 500 horsepower these days without losing control or breaking traction at every curve or intersection. The HiKit and other such controllers remove that lag and makes wide open throttle instant. So what's it like to own a USDM Skyline?
Well, first of all, there's no brand recognition. I mean, it doesn't look like a legacy Skyline. It looks like a Japanese luxury car that's trying to compete with entry-level BMWs. Because, well, it is. But I mean, you gotta remember, the Skyline started life as a luxury sedan. So this is really just the car getting back to its roots. And it's not that there isn't any sport to it, it is plenty heavy, you know. And a lack of brand recognition, well, that's not a bad thing either. Someone once said that a GTR only attracts dudes, kids, and cops. The car's a total sleeper as well, though. I mean, you wouldn't expect it to be packing 400 horsepower under its unassuming hood. But going back to the luxury point, it's comfortable. Very comfortable. I'm a big guy. I'm 6 foot tall, I weigh more than I like to admit, and I've road tripped this car 6 hours straight, only stopping for gas, with no complaints. That may not sound like a feat to the youngins in the nation, but once you're old and beat up enough to hurt, that's a big deal. Now, having said all that, this car is not everything an enthusiast like me could want. For one, this car is heavy. It tips the scales at 4,000 pounds. So a less powerful but much lighter car isn't exactly going to be left eating your dust. It was also the first car to come to market with electronic steering, which makes this steering wheel very, very numb. There is little to no feedback in the wheel, and any weight that there is to it, you only get in Sport or Sport Plus mode, and it's simulated. And that comfortable suspension, that translates to body roll and sluggish direction changes in tight chicanes and slaloms. Then there's the lack of a manual transmission. Granted, an automatic is better in every way these days, mostly because of gearing due to noise laws and faster than human shifts. But there's still something visceral about rolling your own gears. And there's been a few people that have done a manual swap, and with the new Z having the same engine and a manual transmission, I'm sure a few more will undertake the task, but yeah, it's not cheap, it's not easy. And if you opted for the Atessa all-wheel drive, like I did, you're going to have to give that up and go rear-wheel drive. Or you're going to have to pioneer a legacy GTR manual transmission swap. Which leads me to my final complaint. Understeer. Despite the Atessa all-wheel drive system being rear-wheel biased, if you don't have Sport Plus mode from the Sport package, you do have understeer. Now, the good news is, a stiffer rear sway bar will fix that right up.
So would I buy this car again? Maybe. If you're looking for a sporty luxury car, you'll get a whole lot of bang for your buck with this one. If you want that Skyline recognition, look elsewhere. And if you want an out-of-the-box track monster, this is not the car for you. But it was never meant to be a track monster. That's part of the reason why the GTR is now its own nameplate, separate from the Skyline. The Skyline was always meant to be a luxury vehicle. The GTR was a homologation so that Nissan could go racing, and as it gained popularity, the project went wild. But that's the difference. With the Skyline, you're getting practicality, along with fun and smiles per mile. With the GTR, well, there's going to be some compromises. So you decide, which is the car for you?
Alright, that's going to do it for this episode. I want to thank you for watching. If you liked this episode, you learned something today, hit that like and subscribe, share this video, leave a comment, tell your friends. Check back often for new episodes. Until then, keep it safe, keep it on the track.